if you're going to fly over open water, you need to consider your glide ratio and how wind is going to affect that, which would affect your planning to reduce your risk of dying, reduce your risk of ever touching the water, because floats are a great thing to have, but it's not a magic bullet that is going to guarantee you're not going to end up at the bottom of the ocean or wherever, or the bottom of 4 feet of water.
Well, that didn't work at all.
Okay, so I wanted to find out for myself. So glide ratios is a ratio of a distance that you move forward and the distance you move down. So they make it easy, say 5 to 1, 10 to 1. So there's so much variability, you can't just pick a number. You're going to have to find perfect conditions, and all of this is in these standard conditions because this is the ratio that we're told from the manufacturer. I haven't measured it myself. It's something I would like to do with my equipment. But let's look more into, there's some semantics here of glide ratio and effective glide ratio. I think there's going to be two different, we can maybe break this down into two different ratios, but the one that it's most important that we need to refer to is the effective glide ratio. You wouldn't want to use some number you found off the internet. It would all depend on all these factors. So let's look at these factors, and we can try to make a little diagram. Let's go here. So factors affecting glide distance, I guess, is the overarching goal here to understand. So what we have is density, altitude, we'll spell it out. And then we have mass, lift and sink. Lift and sink would be, thermal action or geographic action, wind action, like you're near a cliff or a mountainside on the front side or back side. Find some sink on that backside. Wing configuration and drag. And we'll get man, we love paint. We're going to call this mechanical ratio. And then we'll have our effective ratio. So this is kind of like factors affecting glide distance. So glide distance is determined by your glide ratios, I guess you can say, or your effective ratio in the end. Okay, let's add some guides here. And we'll go through this. So density altitude does not impact your mechanical ratio, because this is like a machine, and the weather does not change the properties of the machine to a notable degree. Yeah, okay, so if it's hot out, things may change fractions of a millimeter. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the sun outside, or it's cloudy, or the humidity's high, or you're at a high altitude. You're in Death Valley. You're in a low altitude. That's not going to change your wing. And mass, same with mass. Again, this does not impact the mechanical glide ratio. So let's start filling this in. No. And now we get into lift and sink. So this would be, again, using geography like a mountain to create an upwards vector of the wind, I guess you can say. So the wind is hitting your wing maybe at a higher angle than your glide slope of your glider. The headwind's not only going to reduce your forward speed so you can hang out around that mountain, hillside or wherever, it also has an upwards force to lift you up. And then there's a force pushing you back. So if we get to the scale, probably a bit more pushing it back. And then sink would be, say you're on the back side, which unlikely, you should not be there. So it'd be like some thermal action, pushing you down. And oops, let's change that color a little bit. Thermal action. And so these smaller arrows would be kind of a lighter impact. So that would be, an arrow pushing you down. Even barely forward. Or a tiny force pushing it back, just because there's these, I just happen to draw an angle that way. So lift and sink also does not, let's add that in there. No. Now here we get into the wing configuration. So we have our speed bar, which would pull your front down, pull the front of the wing down. And then we have our trimmer system that we can let out, open up, and lengthen the rear. So that kind of, in a way, would rotate the wing like this, just to visualize it. And that's going to change your angle of attack and change your change the characteristic of the glider. So this does mechanically change the glider. By how much, we don't know. You have to test it on your wing, exact wing. And then we have our drag. So drag be a little opposing force, and it's down here. So this is kind of a physical layout. And So what would that do? You could think of like this red line, and you had some flaps or something. You keep adding drag. You could see how you would be tilting back. Let's say the motor is moving back with this red line. So as this tilts back, that's gonna pull the front down and raise the rear in a way. So essentially, that's you're rotating the wing. You're changing the angle of attack of the wing. So that kind of changes your wing configuration in a roundabout way. So there's a force that's changing the load on the wing. So it's arguably does change the mechanical ratio. And here, that's one to think about. Here's my cop out, and I guess you may have some logic that we can agree with. So that's the mechanical ratio column. And now let's look at effective ratio. So glide ratio is moving forward a certain amount of units and moving down a certain amount of units. So the example would be a paraglider who does a cross country and goes 20 miles. And they're, 1,000 feet off the ground. So that's they maintain whatever. They maintain some altitude and they go 20 miles. They're going to have a ridiculous, effective glide ratio, even though their paraglider mechanically is only capable of so much in nil wind, zero wind, laboratory type conditions. So that's what we mean when we say effective ratio. So we're kind of looking at the overall picture. Where mechanical is ground level, we're looking at the glider fabric and lines and all that. Where effective ratio is the big picture. How did it actually perform? So we can fill this in real quick here. So density, altitude is going to change your speed. Your ground speed. And as we'll see, there's going to be an impact because it's going to be the percentage of ground speed, and the wind speed as a percentage of ground speed has a major impact in glide distance. Glide distance. Okay, that's what we're analyzing here. So density, altitude makes you go faster and penetrate through wind and go farther. Mass, but there's upsides and downsides. So let's not conclude if it's a good or bad thing. Does it affect it or does it not? So we'll have to look at if that's a good thing or bad thing. So yes, density, altitude would change your speed, faster or slower. Beneficial or not. The mass of the paramotor pilot in this kit would change the ground speed, which would impact glide distance, given there are wind conditions. In laboratory conditions, it does not. Your mechanical ratio. Lift and sink. So that's going to be difficult to quantify. As the atmosphere is so dynamic, we can't easily model that. But I guess we're looking at averages here. So lift and sink, yes. With the paraglider cross-country example, yes, it would affect the ratio, the effective average I guess you can call it average, glide ratio. Wind configuration, yes, of course. So if there are yeses here, then of course glide distance is going to change because glide distance is derived from the ratios. All right, let's continue on with the analysis. So here we have a forward of 5 units, and you go down 1 unit, 10 units, 1 unit. So that could be feet, that could be meters. So I chose to do meters real quick, and then we'll convert it to stuff that we have perspective with as people use these other units. But the math is, it's going to be a little easier to do and see with these numbers. So here was just kind of a check. Let's just make sure the formula is right. So the formula is your altitude here times your forward movement, because this is your altitude is 1. So, kind of 1 to 1. And then over here, we now consider your ground velocity in like normal conditions. All right, so we'll go to miles per hour. So 10 meters a second is about 22 miles per hour. And again, we're just doing math, and then I'm going to convert it later. But I'm just let's go through this. Sorry. And then this is so this is like a standard glider speed of 22. Let's just pretend that's your speed, and then here would be 44, about 44 miles per hour. So these are just 2. And then again, I'm just confirming that the speed of the glider with the same glide ratios, it doesn't matter. So that was kind of this check here. So that's why I did that check. Okay, so now moving on. Just transferring some stuff over. Again, so this would be 0 wind velocity. So 0 headwind. Okay, we have our altitude divided by our down velocity. So these are now how fast we're moving down in meters per second. So that's okay, let's go back. I'm sorry, I did not explain this. So I converted the ratio of 5 units to 1 unit, 10 units to 1 unit. So over here is 10 meters a second, 2 meters a second, 10 meters a second. Okay, 1 meters a second. So we are moving forward at a velocity. So this is a ratio, and we can go to a velocity instead of a distance. So that's what's happening here. So with this glide ratio, we're traveling at a velocity of this. So we're falling at a velocity of this. So we're falling faster because this is a less efficient glide ratio. And then over here, same thing. We're moving at a velocity of 10 meters per second with a glider that has a glide ratio of super efficient 10 to 1 for a paraglider, that is. And then down at 1 meter per second. So it's falling slower at a slower speed. Okay. So now again over here, here's our velocities. I just chose the ground velocity because I did these 2 velocities to start with. I started with this, and I copied this, and then I added these wind velocities on. Okay, so these calculations are redone over here. You can see they match. Now we're going to add this headwind. So since I converted this to a velocity, now we can use the headwind to subtract from the velocity. Okay, so again, these 2 columns are the 2 different glide ratios. I guess we got to fix that. Okay. So our glide ratio for the 2 columns. All right, so our headwind, so you can see we're going to minus from our forward velocity, we're going to minus this speed. So 2 meters a second. What's 2 meters a second? approximately. It's about 4.5 miles per hour, approximately. So then 9, 5, and then 4, 18. Okay. So those are mile per hour equivalents for these velocities here, just to help you as I explain this. So in these headwinds here, all you have to do is minus this. This is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, please. So now I'm just going to minus that from our forward velocity, from our forward. Because if your glider, so a thought experiment and acid test to confirm that this is correct is that if you're flying a glider and on that day in those conditions that are perfect laminar, you are traveling forward at 20 miles per hour and you have a headwind of exactly 20 miles per hour, you would be completely stationary. Therefore, as the wind increases, you don't move as far forward, which would affect your distance in this glide ratio. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we have these velocities, so up to 18 miles per hour. You can see we subtract the 8 meters per second from this, your standard forward velocity, which affects the glide ratio because these numbers are different. So that's why these columns are different. Now down here, boom, just convert over to standard units, English, imperial units. And these are feet. So we're getting up to miles here. So a mile has 5280, 1320 times 4. 1320 is a quarter mile. FYI. So now we'll just take the average. I think that paramotors, a paraglider with no paramotor would be up to 10 to 1s. And then like a paramotorist is going to be down there. So some of these graphs are misleading. Okay. So we made an average glide ratio of 7.5. So we can have a correction factor. So we could correct. So we have like an average between those, and then all said and done, when you're doing the final calculation of your perfect glide distance, you can do the factor to fix that. So here's our average glide distance. So it's all that information, and now it's average. Instead of 2 columns, we have single columns. So if a glide ratio 7.5 to 1. This is your starting altitude in feet, and this is your average glide distance in absolute perfect conditions. So now we can start graphing. This is just that axes are swapped. So here you can see headwind speed. Here's the glide distance, and here's your starting altitude. And this could be like your target LZ. This could be like the beach if you're over the ocean, or a land, an island. If you are this far from shore and you have a headwind of 13.4 miles per hour, you better be at 4,000 feet. But not really, because there's no safety factor. So let's move over to this to gain some more perspective. So we have that graph. We have our distance here up to, about 23 miles, 125,000 feet. And this is like our LZ, like this beach here. And again, this is worst case headwind. So we have a wind pushing us away from the water. It's coming from the right, going to the left. And you can see down here, and these are mile 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15, 20 miles. And then I tried to align this graph, obviously. And then I went into Excel to get the exact numbers here for these yellowed So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20. And this is again with our glider ratio of 7.5 to 1. And you can see I did a little math here and showed the headwind changes your effective glide ratio. So I guess you could technically say now that your headwind changes your glide ratio, but it's your effective glide ratio because mechanically your wing does not change its glide ratio given you don't change trims or go on speed bar. Okay, so here are your headwinds: 5 miles per hour, 9, 13, 18 miles per hour. So this is your required altitudes in here in feet. So if you were a mile offshore, mile here, here's your altitudes for the headwind. So if it's a windy day, this is in perfect conditions without safety factor, without the correction factor. And if you went 5 miles out, okay, you're going to do a YouTube video and do something crazy, man. You don't even have to make a video. And you're going to go 5 miles out. Forecast 9 that day. Let's say you added a little buffer. So you're like, I need to get to about 5,000. But that's not very smart. Okay, so now let's calculate the correction factor. So if our average is 7.5 and our actual is 5, or reasonable guesstimate with a paramotor and a full size male, that's a difference of 2.5. So that difference divided by the starting gives us that. So we want a 1 minus 1 from that. Minus 1 minus 2.5 divided by 7.5. So that's our factor. So we take that and so we need to divide it. So let's take the 704 divided by the point. Okay, yeah, so that's the correction factor. So if it's nil wind and you're a mile out, the correction factor, so this is because this is 7.5, your glider would be different. So you can just looking at this, using this chart right here in front of you, apply this correction factor. So you do the difference between 7.5 and the actual, so that's down here. So 7.5 minus your actual glide ratio, that gives you the difference. Then you do that difference divided by the average, that 7.5. And then you have to minus 1 from that. So that's the full calculation. 1 minus that, it would just give you a negative if you did that minus 1. So then you multiply whatever altitude is on here by that correct. Divide it, not multiply it, because we got to go backwards. So you take that. In this case, that was 704. That's why that 704 is here. So let's say you are 5 miles out, and there's a headwind of 9 miles per hour. So it's 4,400. So 4,400 divided by 0.6667. So instead of so you could see how this chart's misleading. You should actually be about 6,600 feet instead of 4,400 feet. Okay, that's huge. So that's why you have to add so much safety factor. So you could say you can go up the next level and then even add a percentage to that safety factor. So now let's look at the impact of ground velocity. So in nil wind conditions, according to this logic here, which could change if I messed this up and had a logical error in my mind that one of you should proudly point out. However, so in this paradigm, right now, your speed would not affect you, the distance you go, in nil wind, zero wind conditions, as seen here. So let's see how that impacts when you add the wind in. So the reason that happens is because the headwind is less of a percentage of your ground, nil wind ground speed, the speed of the glider. The glider doesn't care about the headwind. It's flying at whatever the glider is flying at. And also you see the size of the altitude loss, that orange block. It would take fewer of those orange blocks to fill up the ground speed on glider A, for example, than the little bit larger orange block on glider B. It would take a few more of those to fill up the ground speed. So what I mean is that ratio, the ratio of the orange to the blue, is better with glider B. So here's at the 20. I gotta try to get this in the screen. Let me zoom out so you can see what happens here. We go to 10. Oh man. And notice how the angle changed. That's the glide slope. That's the glide ratio. That's the glide angle. Alright, I'll put this over here. So wow. Yeah, that's a significant difference. We can switch to that one. So we're back in our sheet. We're going to look at the bonus tailwind situation here. And all these are linked together. We can make these adjustments here, and then we can change our speed, as you can see here. I just put a negative in there to change that to a tailwind. So that tailwind would add itself to this calculation. So here we do that our velocity minus a minus makes you go faster with the tailwind. And here's our final little chart to look at this bonus tailwind and how this bonus tailwind is helping the slower glider. I guess visually here it's kind of showing that. So you could see the glider A is plus 45% when it has a 10 mile per hour tailwind. So that bonus tailwind adds to the ground speed. And that bonus tailwind added 45% ground speed, where the glider B only added 23%. It did still add a bonus, but it didn't add as much. And I added the percentages and some more details for the headwind. And you also have to consider that and extrapolate everything in between. A wind that is sideways or coming in at an angle, a tailwind that's coming in at an angle. So it's going to be somewhere in between these maximums that are calculated with a glide ratio of 7.5 to 1 and these glider speeds. Now that we got both of these kind of side by side, we have our wind speeds, mile per hour, and those wind speeds kind of estimates in these charts that if you wanted to reference and do your corrections to. But here I guess we're kind of generally looking at the slow glider versus fast glider. The blue line is nil wind, so these are the same glide ratio, glide slope is the same. However, you see the slow glider is a little more volatile, so it's takes a huge hit with a headwind as far as making ground. Your glide distance. However, it benefits with a tailwind in that it glides farther. And with the faster glider down here, you see how things are a little bit tightened up, closer to that nil wind, that ideal situation. So there's less of an impact with a tailwind and with a headwind. On the top side of the blue line, the slower glider is impacted so much because the headwind is such a large percentage of the forward speed that it's falling more than it is going forward because the wind is pushing it back. However, on the flip side, the tailwind is pushing it faster than it normally goes, so that helps with the glide slope. That helps with that glide ratio. And again, the fast glider is kind of tightened up, so there's less of a yin and a yang flip-flop, or less of a trade-off, I guess is a better way, more technical way of saying it. So there's more trade-offs with the slower glider. And yeah, take what, there's so many, like I said, variables here that and learning your wing and the glide ratio and all of the settings. Maybe there's some things you can apply here as we analyze this, and maybe some rules of thumbs out there. And another thing is the flight experience. This is an armchair analysis. It's going to be really interesting to hear what people have experienced in the real world who have some data to back it up, or just, that experience to back it up. And hopefully this video stays up because it's right. Because if the video's wrong, it's coming down. And we got to fix one last thing. Well, not fix, we got to add to this chart here. Wind. Wind would not change our mechanical ratio. And absolutely, yes, it would impact our effective ratio. We should call that horizontal wind. It's perfect on a perfect day in laboratory type conditions. And then again, is it a benefit or not? That's up to you, but it does affect your ratio, which would affect your glide distance, which would impact a motor out situation if you're over an ocean or you're over a gigantic forest or something like that. And I hope this is helpful. If you found an error, it is your duty to post that below so I can correct all this. And otherwise, please hit that like button. Thank you very much.